In this video, I will be showing you how to create a basic interactable for use with the generic interaction component kit. I'll be recreating the simple light blueprint found in the provided demo map. The first thing we're going to want to do is create a new actor blueprint. I'm going to name this BP_demo light. Once I have this blueprint open, because it is a light that I want to turn on or off, I am going to add a spotlight component. This is just a normal spotlight, and we're just going to turn it on or off. Now, every interactable for use with the generic interaction component kit has to implement the interactable interface. And what that means is the system will know how to talk to this actor without knowing the details of this actor through this thing we call an interface. Now, in order to add interfaces to your blueprint, click the Class Settings button on the top of your blueprint toolbar, and on the right you'll see a category called Interfaces. Click this Add button and you'll see a list of interfaces pop up. The interface we want is BPI_generic interactable. Be sure not to choose interaction receiver or interactor. Those will be covered in different videos. So once you have your generic interactable interface implemented, go ahead and compile. And we do need to do a little bit of setup for this interactable to work. The first thing we're going to want to do is go to our isFocusable function in our interface list. Now all we need to do here is check this checkbox to true and hit compile, and we're done. What this function does is it tells the component that, hey, this interactable is ready to be looked at, to be interacted with, and it is focusable by the player. When an interactable is focused, it usually has an outline around it and it shows text saying what it can do. So having this return true always simply means that this interactable will always be able to be interacted with. There are cases where you don't want an interactable to always be interacted with, such as a button that can only be pressed once, or other types of mechanics, and in that case you would have advanced functionality in this function. But for now, because we just want to turn this light on or off, having this return true all the time is the right thing to do. Now that that is done, let's go back to our event graph. I'm going to delete these built-in dead functions here, and if you've hit compile, you should now see an event called event interact in your add event list here. So go ahead and choose to add an event interact node here, and this node will be fired anytime a player interacts with this blueprint, such as walking up to it and pressing E. Now for this interact event, all we want to do is to toggle this light on or off. So let's take our spotlight component, and the easiest way to toggle this spotlight on or off is to set this is to call toggle visibility. This simply toggles whether or not this spotlight is on. So go ahead and compile this. And one last thing we need to do here is implement get interaction text. Now this is an optional function that you don't necessarily need to implement for this to work, but it is a nice thing to do to show to the player that what will happen if they press E or if they press interact with this object. So I'm going to write press interact to toggle this light. Now all our functions are done, but we do need to add one more component to this interactable. All interactables need to have a collision of some kind that designates its interaction range. So if we go to add component, you can use any of the collision shapes here or any of the collision elements. You can even use regular static meshes for collision if you want to, but I'm going to add a sphere collision here, and this will make more sense once we have it going. But this sphere will designate the range that you can interact with this interactable. So if the player walks anywhere into this sphere, the player will then be able to interact with this light. Now, one minor performance optimization that's nice to do with these collisions is to go down and change from overlap all dynamic to custom, and make sure you ignore everything but overlap pawns only. Now if you were to choose overlap only pawn, what happens is this sphere ends up blocking other things, and that might mean bullets might hit the sphere when you don't want it to. So again, the best solution I found is go to custom Ignore everything but only overlap with pawns. This is a minor performance gain because now this object won't be looking for collisions with anything else except for pawns. Now that's all you need to do. You don't need to do any additional setup with this collision sphere. You just need it to have it exist and to overlap with pawns. And now if we drop this into the world and move it somewhere sensibly, we can see that this sphere around this light is a bit small. So I'm going to go ahead and take this sphere and I'm going to bump up its sphere radius quite a bit. Compile. And now that sphere is our interaction range that we can, well, interact with this light with. In order to make this light easier to see, I'm going to add a cube component. And this is just a static mesh, just so that it has some sort of visual reference in the world. Now you can use whatever you want. If you have your own light mesh or something, you can go ahead and just add that in here. But without this cube mesh, it's going to be pretty hard to see in the world. Now I'm going to hit play. Alright, so now we have our floating cube that's shining a light on the floor. If we walk up to it, we can see that we can now interact with this light. And if I press E to interact, it toggles the light on or off. Now this light's a little dim, so I'm going to go in the level editor here, choose this light, and I'm going to crank up its intensity, and I'm going to give it a blue color, just so that's more obvious. And here we can see this light is being toggled on or off. I want to make my viewport a little bigger so we can see a bit more, but as we look at the light and press E, it toggles real simply. And that is the basic premise and the basic setup of most interactables. Generally, every interactable that you make, you're going to need to add the generic interactable interface. You're going to make sure that it's focusable. You can add some text to it. You need to add a collision radius so that it can overlap the pawn and the pawn will know that it can interact with this object. And you're going to need to add an interact event to do something when it's interacted with. This is up to you. You can have this destroy the world or kill the player or change levels. Whatever you want this thing to do, you can do. And that is how you set up a basic interactable for the interaction component kit.